Hello. Welcome to this very poorly filmed and edited video that is just intended to be a very quick, simple overview of the law school admissions process and how I kind of navigated it. Fun fact, this is being filmed on my laptop on the photo booth app, so apologies for the quality. I don't have a proper camera. So I'm going to talk about a few different things in this video, and I'll put timestamps for when I talk about what, so you don't have to watch things that you're not interested in. First, deciding to apply to law school. Second, I'm going to be talking about the LSAT and how I studied for it and received my score. And then third, kind of essays and other aspects of the application. And then decision making, I don't have too much on that because that's still very confusing. Kind of said a few months that it took for me to make my decision. But yeah, I'll touch on that as well. I just want to hop in and preface a little bit. This is not a video on how to get into Harvard Law School, which is where I'm going. It's not a video about how to get into an Ivy League law school or how to get this score on your LSAT or any kind of how-to video. It is simply sharing my experiences because I felt vastly unprepared when I was applying to law school, and I wanted to pass on any kind of information I could about what I did. And yeah. And I also want to preface with the fact that I have a lot of privilege applying to law school. There's a great NPR article on this. There's multiple people who've talked about law school admissions and the process being unequal. And I came from a lot of privilege, and so I was able to study without working. And I went to a certain school district that gave me certain privileges. So I'm not coming from a place where I think I'm better than anybody in any way, genuinely. So first of all, the decision to go to law school. I was not one of those people who grew up always knowing that I wanted to do law school. I wanted to be a teacher for the longest amount of time, and I've always had a passion for working with kids, for teaching, for leadership roles. I've always been interested and pretty good at public speaking. I'm a decent writer. So those kind of skills do kind of match up to law, but at the same time, they match up to a lot of other careers. So when I came into college as a freshman, I was a neuroscience major, but I was still calling myself pre-law. So I went to the University of Texas at Austin, where they don't have any kind of pre-law track or any kind of courses that you take. You just say you're pre-law and then apply to law school. So I was basically just calling myself pre-law, but that was primarily because I didn't know many career pathways, and I was kind of thinking of all these things that I had been told were reputable, like medicine, engineering, or law. So those are the kind of things that I was only thinking about, and it wasn't until college that I really had to deeply think about grad school, about HR or consultant or all sorts of careers that come out of college that aren't law school, med school, or getting an engineering job. A lot of my friends were pre-med students, so they knew they had to take the MCAT, and the way it works for medical students is that they have a very kind of set pathway where they have to take these specific courses in order to be able to apply to and get into medical school. And law school is just totally different. So this is something that I had to learn, but what you do in college matters very little to law schools. And that's a bit of a generalization. Obviously, it's a case-by-case basis. If you studied biochemistry and did great research on biochemical elements, molecules, and then you apply to law school, maybe an admissions member will, think that's super interesting, and that'll boost you. But as a generalization, your major in college can really be anything. And so this isn't new advice, but just important advice is choosing something that you're interested in and good at, because your GPA really does matter. So your GPA matters so much that you want to make sure you're not just studying something that is hard for you, because it's better to do well at something and that's something that you enjoy before you go to law school and go 3 years of really, really hard work. So when I was a neuroscience major, I quickly realized that was not going to work out. So I studied a major at UT called Human Dimensions of Organizations and Plan 2. Those are two different majors, and they're both unique to UT, which is why a lot of people don't know what they are. Human Dimensions of Organizations is a way of thinking about how the liberal arts apply in the workplace. So essentially, I like to say it's kind of like corporate psychology / human resources, corporate communication, that kind of thing. And then Plan 2 is an honors major that focuses on critical thinking and critical writing. It's a very liberal artsy humanities major. So both of these majors were really amazing for me because I got to have a lot of flexibility in the classes I took with those majors. I was really glad that I ended up as an HDO Plan 2 major after leaving neuroscience because they let me really explore different classes at UT and kind of think about what really interested me. So I took psychology classes, sociology classes, philosophy classes, math classes, science classes, all sorts of things because my majors were super, super interdisciplinary. And I'm really glad I took interdisciplinary classes. But I will say that if I had decided not to go to law school, I would have been a little frustrated with these majors because I would feel like they don't focus enough. They're very broad and interdisciplinary. With where I've ended up going to law school, I think it's a positive, net positive, because I feel like I've learned about a lot of different things, a little bit about a lot of different things, which is kind of what I wanted out of college anyway, and works for law school because you're going to be going in with a fresh start. But with another career, it might be a little bit harder to hone a large, broad interdisciplinary major into one specific career skill set. But again, so I'll re-stress it. For law school, you do not need to study a specific major in college. No major is going to be the classic law school major that is going to make you get in kind of thing, Obviously, do something you're interested in and something that you're good at. Those are the biggest tips. And none of the classes you take count towards law school. You really, from what I've read and heard, I haven't started law school, but from what I've read and heard, the classes you take aren't necessarily really going to prepare you for the content of law school. Law school is a whole other ball game. But I will say I took a logic class that I really enjoyed and helped me start to think about the LSAT. So logic was great. And philosophy classes were also awesome because I think are a little similar to how lawyers think, or at least the philosophy of law and things like that just help you get into a right mindset maybe. But again, your classes are probably not transferable in most ways, and I'm glad I took a lot of classes that I enjoyed instead of trying to take every legal class out there to prepare myself, because I'm not going to remember that. I don't remember what I read yesterday, so I'm not going to remember what I learned in class sophomore year. Deciding to apply to law school, I had to think about why I wanted to apply. Was I just doing this because it's the most prestigious thing that isn't med school? Was I, just kind of hoping for this clear-cut pathway so I wouldn't have to do the job search and that whole thing? But I ultimately decided to apply to law school because I really wanted the kind of tools that law school gives you in order to approach issues that you care about. I'm very much a justice-oriented, involved person. I have a lot of passions and interests, like youth advocacy, mental health advocacy, and then a really big one is criminal punishment system reform and abolition. So those interests are very, very big interests, and there are a lot of different people working in those fields, which is one crucial thing I had to think about is this law isn't the only way to approach these issues, but it does give you a unique set of tools that can be really, really helpful in advocating for certain causes that you care about. In college, I was involved in a lot of different things, a lot of extracurriculars, mostly because I wanted to. This wasn't in order for my application to look good, because extracurriculars are not a huge part of your application to law school, although having them will be a boost, especially if your GPA and LSAT, one or the other or both, is lower than your median or your 75th percentile for the school you're hoping to look at. They just help you look like a more well-rounded person. So you definitely want to be involved in something, so the admissions committee knows that you're not just numbers, but you definitely don't have to be involved in as many things as I was. I did mock trial my first semester at UT. I was on the UT mock trial team, and I loved it. I've also done it for 2 years in high school, so it was really, really great. The only thing was it was really expensive and extremely time-consuming. So I ended up having to leave mock trial, But I really do like my time there, and I realized I definitely like trial advocacy, litigation, and I will be exploring that more in law school. I was also involved in a community service organization at UT that I joined the end of my freshman year, and then I worked my way up as an officer, and senior year I was president of that organization. And then I was involved in another kind of community organizing, spirit group kind of organization at UT, a cultural organization, another service organization, a South Asian mental health organization, a more specific cultural organization, student government. I think that's it. But yeah, I definitely dipped my toes in a lot of different things. And I'm really glad I did because it helped me kind of get an idea it helped me grow personally, like lots of character growth, let me learn about my leadership skills and flaws and talk about those things in my interviews and essays. So I definitely recommend kind of getting yourselves involved in different groups. For, worst case scenario, you grow as a human being. It's not too bad. Best case scenario, like it gives you some great things to talk about in interviews and essays, and just makes you a more well-rounded, interesting person. Next up, LSAT. Okay, so for a lot of people, the LSAT is the most daunting part of law school applications, and it was also very, very scary for me. So my very first introduction to the LSAT was summer after my freshman year when I read this book about the LSAT by Nathan Fox, and it's called, hold on, let me pull it up. Okay, it's called Introducing the LSAT, the Fox Test Prep Quick and Dirty LSAT Primer by Nathan Fox. It's $9 on Amazon or any other website, and it's a tiny book. It's very thin, it's green, and I just read it that summer to see what the LSAT was so I would at least know what the test looked like. So it goes over the different sections of the LSAT and gives you a bunch of practice problems and then how to kind of think about the answer choices. So I would definitely recommend looking at that early, especially if you're just thinking about law school, no matter how old you are. I think it's a really cool, cheap, easy, small book. And I think the practice problems were cool, although I was definitely very scared because I couldn't get any of them right. Yeah. So I thought that was a really bad sign. I was kind of scared because I could not get a single practice problem right when I was doing that summer. I struggled so much and I was like, can I even take the LSAT? But guess what? You grow as a human being and you learn. I actually started studying for the LSAT at the beginning of the pandemic. Or right towards the beginning of the pandemic. So the pandemic started in March of 2020, and I started studying May of 2020. I had been thinking about taking the LSAT that summer, but I wasn't even 100% sure that I wanted to apply to law school that cycle. But when the pandemic hit, I was stuck at home, and I was fortunate enough to not have to work that summer. And so I had a lot of free time on my hands and no distractions. So I decided to just use that to my advantage. So I studied from May to August, and I took the LSAT at the end of August. It was technically the September test, I think, but it was like the last day of August. And so to take the LSAT, you just look up kind of LSAT times, and the organization that hosts the LSAT is called the LSAC, and that's the Law School Admissions Council, and they kind of handle a lot of things to do with the law school admissions process, so definitely get familiar with that acronym and their website. So I registered for the LSAT a couple months in advance, and then I studied through that summer. So I decided to self-study, which was also quite scary. I didn't know how many books to buy or anything, and I kept looking up different schedules, but I ended up kind of just making up my own schedule. So I had no goal score, which I would say you should probably have a goal score, but I, again, was walking into this totally blind. I didn't know where I wanted to go. I didn't know if I was going to even apply that fall or just take the LSAT and sit on my score because your score is valid for 5 years. I was just going into this blind. So I bought the LSAC Law Hub test bank. So they have this test bank that's 100, let me confirm that. Okay, I just checked it, and it's actually called Official LSAT Prep Plus, and this is on the lsac.org website. And it's $99, and it basically gives you 1 year access to over 70 full official LSAT prep tests. They're offered virtually just like the actual test is, and they give you kind of the authentic test interface. You can do self-paced, so do one section of the test at a time, or you can do the entire simulated exam kind of version. Gives you feedback, practice test history. It's great. I highly recommend it, especially if you're someone who does well with just getting a ton of practice, like doing things over and over again, which I realized I didn't even know that. But before I started taking those tests, the other thing I did was sign up on Khan Academy. So Khan Academy and LSAC have a collaboration where they're offering LSAT prep on the Khan Academy website. It's totally free and comes with several real practice tests that you can take, an entire pathway. So by pathway, I mean that they show you this kind of map thing, and you can see your initial score, and you can take different practice tests. And in between each practice test that they give you on this map, they have a bunch of different, like Khan Academy type sessions. If you've ever used Khan Academy online, you know how that looks, like different questions, and you have to get like 5 right to pass this skill. So they offer all sorts of skill for each section of the LSAT. So I used Khan Academy to study. And once I got to a certain point in Khan Academy, they started repeating the questions because I think that's all the questions they had. So once I got to that point, I stopped using Khan Academy because I realized I had used up all the free stuff they had to offer. So I stopped using Khan Academy, and that's when I really moved on to the LSAC Law Hub, which is where they had over the 70 plus tests. And then I would just take test after test after test. So my study schedule was not super structured, like as expected from me. I'm not a very, very structured person. I need a lot of flexibility, which I was able to get and which I encourage you also build in, especially if there's unexpected kind of things that pop up. I had a whole 2 weeks where I was really sick, so I could not study at all. And it was right before my test date too, so that was really, really anxiety inducing, but it ended up being okay. But I would try to study from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. each day without breaks if possible. But if I was doing a practice test, I would just do the practice test and then stop. And otherwise, I would be doing the Khan Academy practices or looking over past answers and seeing what I had done wrong. Sometimes I would start my study sessions late or end late or whatever may be, but I tried to make it a priority to never think about the LSAT after like 5 p.m. in the day. So I think just a boundary like that really helped me from burning out too much. There's hard work, and I ended up with a 177, which put me in good shape to apply to all the law schools on my list. Until I took the LSAT, I again did not have a school that I was like really looking at. And even as I was applying, I didn't have like a favorite school or anything. So now that we're done with the LSAT, let's move on to law school admission, essays, that kind of stuff.